A man pulled a plastic hand from a frozen lake, and 6 months later, he burned to death in a fire he could have easily escaped without ever trying. Welcome to Alex's Storytime, and I am Alex. Today's story was shared by Chun. It took place in Chun's dad's hometown around 2005. Chun heard it from his grandparents and relatives, who told him the whole village was buzzing about it back then. It happened to a guy in his 50s from Chun's dad's village. His last name was Zhou. When he was young, he'd been a teacher in the county. Later, he moved back to town, rented a small bungalow, and opened a noodle shop. Around 2000, teachers didn't make much, maybe $40 to $60 a month. My dad taught for 35 years before retiring, so I know the deal. Joe's kids were all working out of the town, so it was just him and his wife living together. Life was chugging along fine until things went sideways. There were still some thieves around at the time. Worried about stuff getting stolen from the shop, Joe started sleeping there at night. The noodle shop had 3 rooms: the dining area, the kitchen, and a tiny room that barely fit a bed. That room had a small window. The whole thing went down one hot summer night. The townsfolk were woken up by a racket in the middle of the night, Chun's grandparents included. When they looked outside, they saw several fire trucks heading straight for the noodle shop. When everyone got there, the place was already engulfed in flames, with explosions popping off every now and then. A few firefighters wrestled with it for a good while, and later they even called in another truck. According to Chun's grandma, the fire lit up almost the whole town that night. It burned until dawn before they finally got it under control. When the firefighters went in to look for survivors, all they found was Joe's charred body, burned beyond recognition. At first, everyone figured it was just a tragic accident, and that'd be the end of it. But then people started talking about Joe's weird behavior over the past 6 months, and things got creepy. About 6 months before the fire, Joe was ice fishing one night when he felt something grab his line. When he pulled it up, it was a mannequin hand, an inflatable one, and it was still gripping the line like it was actually holding it. Joe figured it was bad luck, stomped on it until it popped, and told his wife about it when he got home. But not long after that, villagers noticed that Joe was always moping around. Normally, he was a laid-back guy who loved drinking and playing cards with everyone. At first, nobody thought much of it. Then, one card game, he kept spacing out and losing hand after hand, which finally got others' attention. The guy was usually sharp at cards, so this was way off. Someone finally asked him what was going on. Joe came clean about the whole fishing incident, and he also mentioned he'd been sleeping terribly, kept hearing laughing sound right next to his ear at night. Since he was sleeping at a noodle shop in the town, which was noisier than the village and had a lousy installation, everyone just chalked it up to that. But less than a week later, things got worse. It wasn't just at the shop anymore. Even at home, he'd hear this faint laughter at night. His wife asked if it was a man or a woman, but Joe couldn't tell. Neither of them worried too much about it. It was just a faint sound, not really messing with his sleep yet. But then things spiraled way out of control. About a month later, some villagers spotted Joe's kids driving him and his wife somewhere. Curious, someone asked where they were going. Turned out Joe's hallucination had gotten seriously bad. He'd wake up in the middle of the night, convinced he heard that laughing again. Sometimes he'd even start swinging at the air with his bare fists, yelling that the sound was coming from right there. His wife tried having him sleep with earplugs, but it didn't help at all. It got worse. Even at home, not at the shop, he'd hear it. He'd bolt awake in the middle of the night, grab a wooden stick, and stand there ready to fight, swearing someone else was in the house. Eventually, he started hearing the laughter during the day too, so his kids rushed back home that same night. They took him to the county hospital. The doctors ran all kinds of tests, even scanned his brain, but found nothing. So the county doctor suggested they try the city hospital. Higher hospitals. They drove over that same day, got his ears thoroughly checked, even saw a psychiatrist, found nothing wrong. The doctors were stumped and just told the family to keep an eye on him, help him relax and see how things went. But after that, Zhou only got weirder. Sometimes at night, he'd suddenly clamp his hands over his ears, looking like he was in agony, though he seemed fine during the day. So for a while, Zhou would close up the noodle shop early every evening and sleep at home. His wife remembered one night especially vividly. She was a light sleeper. Any little sound would wake her up. That night, she suddenly heard a string of loud crashes. When she turned on the light and saw Zhou, she nearly had a heart attack. His face was covered in blood, and he was clutching a stick. The kitchen was trashed, pots and pans scattered everywhere. Zhou just stood there, muttering to himself, but nobody could make out what he was saying. His wife rushed him to the town clinic that same night for a tetanus shot. After that, Zhou was basically famous in the village. Everyone kept asking what he'd heard that night, but he couldn't really explain, just mumbled something about footsteps and laughter. His wife refused to let him work at the noodle shop anymore. His son kept bringing in doctors, trying different medications, even psychiatric drugs. Nothing worked. Things got to the point where Zhou would blast the TV at home so loud the neighbors could hear it clearly from the yard. When asked why, he said the moment things got quiet, he'd hear those footsteps and that laughter. Then, about a month before the fire, Zhou seemed to suddenly get way better. He barely heard the sounds anymore, day or night. He stopped waking up all night long. Nobody knew what had happened before, but everyone was just relieved to see him improving. He started playing cards with his buddies again, and that cheerful expression came back. He reopened the noodle shop, and his son headed back to work. Everything seemed to be looking up. But then, 5 or 6 days before the fire, Zhou dragged out a pile of old clothes and furniture, piled them by the front door, and set them all on fire. When villagers asked what he was doing, he calmly said he probably wouldn't make it through the month, and he'd need them in the other world. He said it so calmly, like he'd already made peace with it. His wife figured he was joking and got a little annoyed. Everyone else treated it as a joke too. Zhou had always been pretty healthy. But just a few days later, tragedy struck. Honestly, the story wouldn't even be that creepy if it ended here. Most people would assume Zhou had some kind of a breakdown and torched the place to end it all. But here's where it gets weird. After putting out the fire, the firefighters went in to figure out what started it. Everyone initially assumed suicide, but strangely, they traced the fire back to an electrical short that overheated and ignited. No signs of tampering whatsoever. But here is the thing. Zhou's room was a good distance from where the fire started, and he had a smoke alarm that would have blared loud enough to wake the dead. Plus, Zhou was a light sleeper. He kept a portable fire extinguisher in his room, and there was a window. Sure, it was small, but Zhou was skinny and nimble. He could have squeezed through it. On top of that, 2 doors separated his room from the dining hall where the fire began, and one of them was metal. The firefighters determined the fire didn't explode everywhere at once. It smoldered for a good 10 minutes before reaching the kitchen gas tank and really blowing up. They also considered carbon monoxide poisoning, but the window was open, so there was plenty of air circulation. But the weirdest part, Zhou hadn't struggled at all. The villagers said the firefighters couldn't believe it. Apparently, even someone trying to kill themselves would flinch when the flame hit. But according to the guys on the scene, there wasn't a single sign Zhou had fought back. Then, under the kitchen stove, they found a plastic mannequin hand. It was burnt black by then, but Zhou's wife swore up and down it didn't belong in their noodle shop. Transit, the whole thing blew up into this massive local legend. The noodle shop got torn down eventually, and the lot's been empty ever since. But even now, if you walk over there, you can still see those scorch marks on the ground. Okay, everybody, this is the end of the whole story. Please share what you think of the story and your stories. If you enjoy my work and would like to help me to continue to bring these stories to you, please subscribe to my channel or like my page. Give a thumbs up to the stories you appreciate and share your thoughts, opinions in the comments. I'd love to read them. Share the stories with anyone who might find them enjoyable, and I need a co-editor and native English speaker to make these stories better. Thank you, everybody. This is Alex's Story Time, and I am Alex. I got a lot of good stories to share with you. See you next time. Bye bye, everybody.